The Midnight Masquerade. The clock struck midnight, and the grand ballroom of Ashworth Manor was a whirl of masked figures, the air thick with the scent of perfume and intrigue. The manor, an opulent estate on the outskirts of London, had seen many parties, but none as extravagant or enigmatic as this. The occasion was the annual Masquerade Ball, a tradition of the Ashworth family for over a century. Yet this year it carried an unusual tension, a whisper of something sinister beneath the surface. Detective Inspector Harold Whitmore, a man of imposing stature with a keen eye for detail, watched the proceedings from the shadows. He was not one to be easily swayed by the glitter and the glamour of high society. His mind always focused on the task at hand. Tonight, he was here not as a guest, but on a mission. A series of thefts had plagued the wealthy elite of London, and the clues had led him to this very ball. Lady Evelyn Ashworth, the hostess and matriarch of the Ashworth family, glided through the crowd, her mask a delicate creation of gold and feathers. She was known for her sharp wit and even sharper eyes. Nothing escaped her notice. Her son, Edward, a dashing young man with a reputation for reckless behavior, was by her side, his mask hiding a perpetual smirk. Whitmore's attention was drawn to a figure at the edge of the room, a woman in a crimson gown whose mask was a stark contrast to the rest, plain, black, and devoid of ornamentation. She seemed out of place, her eyes scanning the room with a mix of curiosity and anxiety. The detective's instincts told him she was important, though he couldn't yet discern why. The ballroom, a grand affair of crystal chandeliers, polished marble, was a testament to the Ashworth family's wealth and influence. Guests mingled their conversations, a murmur of laughter and whispers. The orchestra played a waltz, its melody weaving through the air like a delicate thread. Whitmore, standing near a pillar, observed the guests with a practiced eye. His previous encounters with high society had taught him that beneath the veneer of sophistication often lay a web of secrets and lies. His thoughts were interrupted by a familiar voice. "Inspector Whitmore," Dr. Graham said, approaching with a glass of champagne. "I didn't expect to see you here tonight." "Duty calls, Doctor," Whitmore replied, his eyes still scanning the crowd. "I'm following a lead on the recent thefts." Dr. Graham nodded, his expression serious. "It's troubling to think someone among us could be responsible." Whitmore's gaze shifted back to the woman in the crimson gown. "Do you know her?" Dr. Graham glanced in the direction Whitmore indicated. "I've seen her before. Clara Montague, I believe, a journalist." "Interesting," Whitmore mused. "She seems nervous." Dr. Graham smiled faintly. "Journalists often are, especially when they're out of their depth." Before Whitmore could respond, the music stopped abruptly. A scream echoed through the hall, silencing the room. Lady Ashworth lay on the floor, clutching her chest, her mask askew. Guests rushed to her aid, but it was too late. She was dead. The ballroom erupted into chaos, but Whitmore's voice cut through the din. "Everyone, remain calm and stay where you are. No one leaves until we have answers." Guests exchanged anxious glances, but obeyed. Whitmore knelt beside Lady Ashworth's body, noting the telltale signs of cyanosis, a clear indication of poisoning. His mind raced as he surveyed the room. He needed to act quickly to preserve any evidence. "Dr. Graham," Whitmore called, "your expertise might be needed here." Dr. Graham knelt beside him, his face grim. Cyanide, I suspect. Quick and deadly. Whitmore nodded, his attention already shifting to the guests. Edward, he called, his tone firm. Who is she? The woman in the red dress. Edward, his face pale and drawn, looked in the direction Whitmore indicated. I don't know. She wasn't on the guest list. Whitmore's gaze hardened. Find her and bring her to me. As Edward and a few other guests began their search, Whitmore turned to the remaining crowd. He needed to piece together the events leading up to Lady Ashworth's death. Moving from guest to guest, he asked questions, observing reactions, looking for anything that seemed out of place. Excuse me, Inspector, a voice interrupted his thoughts. It was Dr. Graham. There was a man, someone I didn't recognize. He was speaking to Lady Ashworth just before she collapsed. Tall, dark hair, wearing a silver mask. Whitmore's mind raced. Another mystery guest. He needed to find this man, but before he could act, Edward returned, dragging the woman in the red dress behind him. She was trembling, her eyes wide with fear. Please, she begged. I didn't do anything, I swear. Whitmore studied her closely. Who are you? My name is Clara, she stammered. Clara Montague. I'm a journalist. I was here to cover the ball for the Times. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. A journalist, you say? And why were you so interested in Lady Ashworth? Clara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I've been investigating the thefts. I had a lead that they were connected to someone in this household. I came tonight to gather information. Whitmore's mind worked quickly, piecing together the fragments of the puzzle. If Clara was telling the truth, then someone in the Ashworth family could be the culprit. But who? Take her to one of the rooms upstairs, he instructed Edward. We'll question her further later. As Clara was led away, Whitmore turned his attention back to the crowd. He needed to find the man in the silver mask. He moved through the guests, his eyes scanning every face, every mask. Finally, he spotted him, standing near the edge of the room, watching the proceedings with a calm, detached air. Whitmore approached him, his hand resting on the hilt of his revolver. I need to speak with you, he said, his voice firm. The man turned, his eyes cold and calculating behind the mask. Of course, Inspector. How can I help? Your name, Whitmore demanded. Henry Beaumont, the man replied smoothly. I'm a friend of the family. Whitmore studied him closely. There was something off about him, something that didn't quite add up. What were you discussing with Lady Ashworth before she collapsed? Beaumont's expression didn't change. We were discussing the thefts, Inspector. I've been investigating them as well, at the family's request. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. And did you discover anything? Beaumont smiled, a cold, calculating smile. Indeed I did, Inspector. I discovered that the thief, is closer than you think. Before Whitmore could react, Beaumont reached into his coat and pulled out a vial. He threw it to the ground, and a cloud of smoke filled the room. Panic ensued, and in the chaos, Beaumont disappeared. Whitmore coughed, trying to clear the smoke from his lungs. He needed to find Beaumont, needed to catch him before he could escape. But the room was a blur of panicked guests and swirling smoke. Finally, the smoke began to clear, and Whitmore saw him, Beaumont running towards the garden doors. Whitmore gave a chase, his heart pounding. He couldn't let him escape. They burst into the garden. The cool night air, a sharp contrast to the stifling heat of the ballroom. Beaumont was fast, but Whitmore was faster. He tackled him to the ground, pinning him with his knee. It's over, Whitmore said, breathing heavily. You're under arrest. Beaumont struggled, but Whitmore held him firm. "You don't understand," he gasped. "It's bigger than you think. The thefts, the poison, it's all connected. There's someone else, someone pulling the strings." Whitmore's mind raced. Could he be telling the truth? But before he could question him further, a shot rang out. Beaumont's body went limp, and Whitmore turned to see Edward standing nearby, a smoking gun in his hand. "He was going to kill you," Edward said, his voice shaking. "I had to stop him." Whitmore looked at Beaumont's lifeless body, then back at Edward. Something about this doesn't add up, but he needed more information. He needed to piece together the final parts of the puzzle. In the days that followed, Whitmore conducted a thorough investigation. He questioned Clara. He provided valuable insights into the thefts and their connection to the Ashworth family. She revealed that she had been following a trail of clues that led her to believe someone within the family was involved. Clara had discovered discrepancies in financial records and suspicious meetings that pointed to a deeper conspiracy. Whitmore delved into Beaumont's background, uncovering a web of deceit and betrayal that stretched back years. Beaumont had been using his position of trust to manipulate and control those around him. His involvement in the thefts was just the tip of the iceberg. Beaumont was part of a larger network, a clandestine group with far-reaching ambitions. As Whitmore pieced together the evidence, he realized that Beaumont had been playing a dangerous game. He had used his charm and influence to gain access to powerful circles, all while secretly orchestrating a series of crimes. Lady Ashworth had discovered his activities and confronted him, leading to her untimely death. But Edward's involvement remained a mystery. Why had he killed Beaumont? What was he hiding? Whitmore confronted Edward in the study, the room filled with the weight of unanswered questions. "Why did you do it, Edward?" he demanded. "Why did you kill Beaumont?" Edward's face was pale, his eyes filled with fear. "I had no choice," he said quietly. "Beaumont was going to expose me. I was part of his organization, Inspector. I didn't want to be, but I had no choice. He blackmailed me, threatened to ruin me if I didn't help him." Whitmore's mind raced. The pieces finally fit. Edward had been caught in a web of deceit, forced to betray his own family to protect himself. But in the end, he had chosen to do the right thing, to stop Beaumont and his plans. With Edward's confession, the case was finally closed. Lady Ashworth's death had been avenged and the threat to the city neutralized, but the cost had been high, and Whitmore knew that the scars of this night would linger for a long time. As he left Ashworth Manor, the dawn breaking over the horizon, Whitmore couldn't shake the feeling that this was not the end, but merely the beginning of a darker conspiracy. The shadows that Beaumont hinted at loomed larger, promising more secrets, more betrayal, and more danger in the days to come. Whitmore spent the following weeks digging deeper into the organization Beaumont had mentioned. He uncovered a network of influential individuals, all linked by a common goal: the destabilization of the government and the accumulation of power. The deeper he dug, the more dangerous it became. One evening, as Whitmore sat in his study, a knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Clara, her expression serious. "I've found something," she said, handing him a folder. "It's a list of names, people involved in Beaumont's organization." Whitmore scanned the list, recognizing several prominent figures. This was bigger than I had imagined. The conspiracy reached into the highest of society. "We need to be careful," Clara said. "These people are dangerous. They won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens their plans." Whitmore nodded, his resolve steeling. We'll take them down, one by one. They won't get away with this. The investigation led Whitmore and Clara to a series of clandestine meetings and secret exchanges. They gathered evidence, working tirelessly to unravel the conspiracy. It became clear that Beaumont had been just one piece of a much larger puzzle. One night, as they were closing in on a key figure, Whitmore receives an anonymous tip. A meeting was to take place at an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Whitmore and Clara decided to investigate, knowing it could easily be a trap. The warehouse was dark and foreboding, its windows shattered and its structure decaying. Whitmore and Clara approached cautiously, their senses alert. Inside, they found a group of men huddled around a table, discussing plans in a hushed tone. Whitmore signaled to Clara, and they moved closer, listening to the conversation. The men spoke of their next target, a high-profile assassination that would send shockwaves to the government. Whitmore's heart pounded. They had to stop this. But before they could act, one of the men noticed their presence. "We're not alone," he hissed, drawing a gun. Chaos erupted as Whitmore and Clara found themselves in a firefight. Bullets whizzed past, and the sound of gunfire echoed through the warehouse. Whitmore took over behind a crate, returning fire with precision. In the midst of the chaos, Clara managed to slip away. Circling around to flank the men, she took down one of the attackers with a well-placed shot, but another lunged at her, knocking the gun from her hand. Whitmore saw the danger and moved swiftly, tackling the man and disarming him. The remaining attackers fled, realizing they were outmatched. Whitmore and Clara stood amidst the wreckage, breathing heavily. "We need to get this information to the authorities," Clara said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Whitmore nodded. "And we need to be ready. They won't stop until they're caught." Armed with the evidence they had gathered, Whitmore and Clara worked with trusted allies within the police force to launch a series of raids. One by one, the members of the organization were apprehended, their plans thwarted. But the true mastermind remained elusive. Whitmore knew they were still out there, orchestrating events from the shadows. The final confrontation was inevitable. It came on a stormy night, the rain lashing against the windows of Whitmore's office. An envelope had been delivered containing a single word: tonight. Whitmore knew what it meant. He gathered his gear, preparing for the encounter. Clara insisted on coming with him, despite the danger. They arrived at an old manor on the outskirts of the city, its silhouette looming ominously against the stormy sky. Inside, they found the mastermind, a figure shrouded in darkness, their face hidden. "Inspector Whitmore," the figure said, their voice smooth and cold. "I've been expecting you." Whitmore stepped forward, his resolve unwavering. "It's over. Your organization is finished." The figure laughed, a chilling sound. "You underestimate the reach of our influence. This is far from over." Before Whitmore could respond, the figure lunged, a knife gleaming in the dim light. Whitmore dodged, the blade missing him by inches. He countered with a swift punch, knocking the knife from the figure's hand. Clara moved in, her gun trained on the figure. "It's over," she repeated, her voice firm. The figure glared at them, their eyes filled with hatred. "You may have won this battle, but the war is far from over." Whitmore secured the figure with handcuffs, his mind already racing with the implications of their words. The conspiracy might be deeper and more complex than they had imagined, but for now, they had dealt with a significant blow. As the sun rose over the city, Whitmore and Clara stood on the steps of the police station, watching as they captured members of the organization were led away. The immediate threat had been neutralized, but the shadow of the conspiracy still lingered. We did it, Clara said, a note of triumph in her voice. Whitmore nodded, his expression thoughtful. This is just the beginning. We've uncovered a lot, but there's still more to do. We'll need to stay vigilant. Clara smiled. I'm ready for whatever comes next. Whitmore looked at the city, the dawn breaking over the horizon. The masquerade was over, but the dance of shadows and light would continue, and he would be there, ready to uncover the truth, no matter how deep it went. The Midnight Masquerade had lifted the veil on a world of intrigue that Whitmore and Clara would have to navigate with caution. The true mastermind was still out there, watching, waiting, and plotting their next move. But Whitmore was ready. He would face whatever came next, armed with the truth and a resolve that no mask could hide.